little bit about how to manage some of these documents and hopefully coordinate some of the care and make things a little bit more organized. I want to give credit. Our parent partner, Monica, put together these slides for us, and then, last minute was able to go with her son on his field trip. So I will do my best to share all of the great information that she put together. And if anyone has thoughts or questions throughout the presentation, definitely feel free to put those into the chat. We'll have some time at the end to talk a little bit more, but if you have a thought, definitely put that into the chat while we're going through these. Next slide. So when we're talking about the medical system, which is one of the systems we've talked about today with the case, really we're talking about the different types of health care that a child or an individual might be accessing. So we talked a little bit about hospital care. So CHOP, we have some different systems in place for managing documents. We have the portal called MyChop, and like Judy mentioned, most other large hospital systems today will have something similar that offers a way to access different documents and look up appointment history and things like that. This is also going to include primary care, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that during the presentation and the role that a primary care provider really can play for families in helping to manage some of the different care. Nurses, other specialists. So for today's case, we mentioned that that child was getting an outpatient physical therapy. So that's often something provided through a medical system if a child qualifies for that, and then different other therapists that might be available as well. Next slide. So knowing how to navigate the medical system, but really kind of all of these different systems we've talked about, so educational system, behavioral health system, these are really challenging things to learn about, but also really helpful and important. So this is going to help your family to make sure that you're getting quality health care, quality behavioral health, quality mental health care, access to the right specialists. And even, we've spent a lot of time during these sessions talking about different evaluations and, how you might go about getting a diagnosis of autism or of something else. And so specifically, like in today's case, this child has a very specific medical diagnosis as well as autism. And so understanding, how to kind of navigate all of those needs is complex, but really important because, in his case, he's going to have things that are affected with his physical health because of his medical diagnosis. And then he's also going to have these behavioral health needs related to his autism. And then, we discussed potentially intellectual disability. And so this family is going to, over the lifespan of this child, they're going to have to really be able to access different support systems and different services. And so sort of learning how to do that is really important. So I mentioned the primary care provider can really play an important role. And I think, we find that many families, this is really sometimes the first person or one of the first people that a family might be having a conversation with when they have a concern about their child's development or about something medical. And so having a primary care provider that you really feel comfortable with and that you have a good relationship with can be one of the key factors in really helping to manage and navigate a lot of these other systems and services. So you want to have somebody that you feel is working with you together and that you can have open conversations and is willing to sort of meet you wherever your family might be at that time. So when we're thinking specifically about autism, our primary care providers really have to have a knowledge about lots of different things. So they don't necessarily have to be an autism specialist, but, having a provider who is willing to learn and who wants to, understand the specific needs of your child and can talk with you about different service options that might be available, help you make, decisions and recommendations. That's really the important piece. And, so sometimes even asking, a provider, do they see a lot of children with autism, or fill in the blank, whatever, the condition or diagnosis for your child might be. Are you comfortable with services related to this? So again, they don't need to be a specialist on any of these specific conditions or diagnoses, but really somebody that you feel you can have open conversations with and who can hopefully help direct you to some other resources that might be available is really important. So then we started to talk a little bit today too about what are the priorities. So, we have a diagnosis, we understand there might be some different supports we need, but what are the things that are going to be priority and how can we access those while also supporting the rest of the family? So, in this particular case from today, there weren't other children in the house, which you know, might make certain things a little easier to navigate. But often we have siblings and we have other family members. We talked a little bit about some of the grandmothers, limited mobility. So these are all really important factors when we're thinking about what's realistic and how can we provide support in a way that also is supportive to the whole family. And this situation as well with the custody and whether or not father is going to be involved. So these are all factors that can really play a role as we're thinking about how do we support this family in accessing things related to the autism and related to the medical needs, but also that are going to be realistic for a family. And then we talked a bit about the importance of school. So again, as he transitions into the public school system, for the next potentially up to 16 years, this is going to be one of the primary support systems available for the family. And many of the services he needs may be provided through school, which is really a great system. But having that communication and making sure that the family is aware of the things that are happening at school and what sorts of interventions the team's using and how those can be maybe implemented at home, that's going to be really important. So coordinating with the school and knowing who are the people you can reach out to at the school. So most of the time, when a child qualifies for special education, they're going to have a specific point person who's usually considered their case manager for school, who's going to manage the IEP. And that person may change from year to year, but there should be a designated case manager every year that the family, has contact information for, that you can reach out to for questions, that you can get updates from. And also, this person might help you think about what are some things we want to supplement outside of school. So here's all the things that we're providing at school, and here's how these things are, supporting your child, and how can we sort of continue those things into the community. And again, as we talked about with today's case, if there's other diagnoses, so, in this case, we have some significant potentially medical needs as well. So, how do we make sure those specialists are also tied into the team, that we're having consistent, appointments when they're needed, and, that those different providers are aware of kind of all of the services that are in place. And then this last note is in terms of medical care, many families find it helpful to try to stay within one health system. And that's certainly not necessary. And with the way that our electronic medical records work today, it's often possible that providers from different medical systems might be able to see some of the different notes and reports. But having the providers within the same system can offer some continuity of care, and might make it a little easier to get a referral to a new specialist or to have two providers communicate rather than parent or family member having to be the one to really coordinate all of that communication. So we wanted to also sort of talk a little bit about remembering to focus on each individual child. So throughout this process, there are, lots of services and lots of systems and lots of documents that are going to be coming your way. But in every case, you and your family really know your child best. And you know that, they're going to have preferences and dislikes just as anyone else. And so many families find that creating sort of a profile for their child can be helpful as they're navigating all these systems and meeting all of these different providers. And so some families might make sort of like a paper document or like almost like a flyer that they can share with a new provider. I've worked with some families who've actually made like PowerPoint slideshows and start every school year with giving a little 5-minute presentation to the new school team on what their child likes, what their child doesn't like. I've had families make little short video clips of their child, other approaches that are creative that way. And as the child gets older, they can really take an active role in being part of this. And so I think sometimes even as providers, we know our disciplines and our specialty areas, and we can get focused on those things. And this really can help make sure that everybody's remembering who this individual child is and, what what sorts of things are going to really motivate them and make them excited. And so school teams often change a little from year to year. Sometimes therapists change, there's somebody new coming to the team. And so having a little bit of a profile can sort of help to do a quick introduction for new team members. And so the next couple slides, we'll give an example of one that was made. Go ahead to the next slide. So this, normally this would be sort of underneath each other on, a handout or a piece of paper. So just a little quick summary, of who this child is, a photo, some of his favorite things, so different interest areas. And this can be really helpful when we're trying to motivate, a child, or thinking about how can we help them learn in the most effective way. Things that he's really good at, so skills that we know are going to be a little bit easier, and then things he's working on. So maybe areas where we can anticipate this is going to be a little bit more challenging if we, are, for example, having to change the schedule, or there's, something unexpected happening. We might be able to be a little more proactive with some of those things. Motivating, different tactics for motivation. That's really individualized. So, this is really helpful across the board, I think, to know what a child likes and what's going to get them excited. And you can go to the next one. And then on the back for this particular child, this was like a double-sided page. So on the back was just this sort of list of like things that are important to know. So certain behaviors that he may exhibit on a pretty regular basis that might have some explanation, but if you didn't know them, you might respond in a different way. Talking through some things that might be really helpful, things that maybe you notice and you're going to understand, he's just taking a break right now. This isn't, he walked out into the hallway, not reason for panic. This is a common behavior. We're just going for a walk. And then in this case, the family left, they include their cell phone number there. So that, and if anybody, wants to reach out and has questions, they can contact the parent. So this is just kind of one example of a nice sort of profile that can be really helpful for introducing new team members to your child and their specific interests and likes and dislikes. So now talking a little bit about staying organized for appointments, which can be really challenging. So I know we had some talk about, some different strategies that people might use. And while we're going through this, I would love if anybody has found a specific, I know there's tons of different apps and devices and different things that people can use now. If you have anything specific that you've tried that you find really helpful, go ahead and put that into the chat. Some of us still love just using a paper calendar or, a scheduling book. And so that can certainly be helpful, or having maybe a planner or a calendar, for the week or the month sort of posted somewhere where everybody can see it. Digital calendars. So this is, I think most of us probably, use this potentially for work or other things where we, have access to that on our phone and on our computer and can easily see what meetings or appointments we have coming up. And there's also now, I know they make sort of like digital wall calendars that can be, put up somewhere in the house that sort of will mimic whatever we have on our phone and our computer, but can be a shared calendar that everybody in the family can see and add to and have it up in one place where everybody can see. Also, this idea to sort of keep a notebook or a notes file next to your bed. I know for myself, it's often when I'm trying to fall asleep at night that I have 1,000 thoughts about, what I need to do the next day, or, ideas or things that I forgot to do. So having a place where you can jot some notes down for yourself as you're thinking of them can be really helpful. And then looking for so a critical care coordinator or like complex care schedulers. So sometimes, particularly when you have a child who might have multiple different needs and you're wanting to schedule some of their appointments. I know at CHOP we have some different scheduling systems where we can try to sort of coordinate those appointments. So if a family is traveling, for a little distance to come to appointments, and we can let them see 2 or 3 specialists on the same day, that's a strategy that's sometimes really helpful rather than having to schedule each of those as its own separate thing. Working with, a case manager can be really helpful. So sometimes this is available through the medical system. Some insurance companies, have care managers or case managers that are available to help families sort of thinking about how to better organize all the different care teams they have. And then also through the behavioral health system, sometimes there are case managers that a family might qualify for. So for today's, the case that we talked about today, I might think about seeing whether that family could get a case manager from a community-based agency who can sort of help them to think through all of these different systems and help them organize, some of the different steps they're going to want to take, as this child's entering school, and then maybe thinking about other support services that could be available for the family. Go ahead. And then thinking about the documentation itself. So we certainly have moved more into a digital world now than, maybe 10 years ago, but often there are still things that are given to families in paper form. And so I think thinking that through, you've got your medical documentation, then we've got our educational documentation. If there's any other support services in place, like government programs, you may have some paperwork and documents for that. And then the behavioral health system. So like we were talking about before, trying to sort of, as much as possible, choose one of those methods, what works best for your family, whether it's going to be keeping lots of paper copies or trying to have things, be digital and saved on your phone or on your computer can be really helpful. I'm going to turn off my background for one second and just show something that some families have found. We used to have these at CHOP. This was just like a care binder that a family could receive. And inside were different tabs for, I don't know how well anyone can see this, but different tabs for sort of all those different systems that we've been talking about. So there's one for family, there's one for medical, there's one for educational. And so if you're somebody that really likes to have a concrete copy of things and you still like to have that paper copy, then this might be a strategy that works really well, and keeping it all in one place and sort of keeping the most recent copies of everything right there in front of you can be really helpful. But again, some people, yes, this very much looks like a trapper keeper. Some people prefer to keep things electronically. And as we were saying earlier, we have through CHOP, the My CHOP portal, where any document that's generated is going to automatically be uploaded into that portal. Now, you won't be able to keep your educational records there as well, unless you've sort of, if you've given those copies to a medical provider and they've scanned them into the medical chart, then they might be available there as well. So that might be a system that works really well. Or you might create, scan in PDFs of all of the documents you get and keep those in one file on your computer. So it's really a matter of sort of what works best for the individual and what's going to help simplify this, because it can really build up over the years. And then another sort of suggestion or strategy is that annually or more often, sort of going through and maybe deciding to archive older documents. So every year when the IEP, is updated, or more frequently than once a year, you're going to have, a new updated version. And so you may want to keep a copy of the old one in case there was a strategy or a goal that was worked on in the past that you want to make sure you remember. But really, the current IEP is going to be the active one. And so having that somewhere that's easily accessible is going to be helpful, but maybe those older files can be archived or put somewhere in storage so that really you're able to easily get to the most current and the most relevant paperwork. I like this last bullet that Monica put in here too, is that sometimes looking back at some of those old documents can really help you realize the progress that's happened as well. So it can feel slow sometimes, or it can feel like we're working on the same goal forever. But I think, living in it every day, it's hard to sometimes see those little bits of progress. So looking back at your old paperwork might be a way to sort of help remind yourself of how far your child has come and all of the different things they've accomplished. And then we've talked a bit about this today too, but that communication is really key. So, we often will have families fill out a release form. So, in order for a medical provider to talk to a school provider, they have to have the parents' permission to do that. And so, being proactive and offering and wanting to sign those release forms can really help all of the teams. So, even as the parent, you can make that suggestion and say, I'd like to have a release form for, my child's school team and our outpatient provider, because I want the medical team to be able to talk to those people. Having regular sort of check-in meetings or sort of progress update meetings can be really helpful. And for the school team, having consistent communication is really key. And so this can be something that is even part of the IEP, that, there's a strategy for how the team's going to communicate with the family, and whether that's, scheduled meetings, or it could be a communication journal that goes back and forth, or a weekly email. So there's lots of different ways to do that. But as a parent, really that's your right to want to know what's happening, what your child's working on, how you can bring those things, back home and continue to work on those goals. So if you feel like you're not getting that, it is certainly your right to speak up and to advocate and to make sure, that those different providers are really working together to the best of their ability and communicating with you as the parent. So we do have some time for questions or